head into the next and actually one of the last portions of our day. What the heck do you do with this playbook? Many years ago, if you have played video games for a while, I don't know if anyone remembers the game Altered Beast that came out on Sega. All right, we got 1, 2. There was an arcade version as well. My friend and I would play this. There's a lot of games we play a lot. But what I loved about Altered Beast is there was this, every level, there's this white wolf that would appear. If you got the white wolf, this little spirit orb would come out, and you could level up your character 3 times in a level. And the 3rd time you level up, you become a mythological creature with a special power, a wolf, a dragon, whatever it could be. And every time you got one of those orbs, this ominous voice would come over the speaker in a very detracted 8-bit kind of way and say, "Power up." And so this might be a little too inside about my humor, but I have one good friend who I played this game with consistently. And every time we do something amazing, sometimes we don't intend to, or we learn a new skill or do just something incredible, we just both look at each other and go like, "Power up." And so that's what we're gonna do now. We're gonna power up. Our game design skills with the amazing Weszt Hart. Please put your hands together as we bring him up to the stage.
Are we holding up? Pretty good. Good, good. I wasn't sure what the response was going to be, but I am sympathetic, empathetic. We have been here for a number of hours, and we have been listening to a lot. And I guess in a way, I'm going to apologize because this session will be jam-packed. Among other things, for the first time today, you will actually see the playbook. Furthermore, thank you. I know, right? Oh, thank God. What were we here for? Additionally, though, you are going to use it. Everyone here that's in person, everyone that's watching, and anyone that's watching later, you are actually going to get the opportunity to get first-hand experience using the Digital Thriving Playbook. And if I can be personal for a moment, it is so exciting to be able to say all of that. Because we had no idea that this is what we were going to be working on. I think if somebody told me 3.5 years ago that I was personally going to be spending hundreds upon hundreds of volunteer hours, not just putting together the website, but writing, I think I've written 30 articles and developing the tools and doing the training and the workshops, I doubt I would have done it. Or I certainly wouldn't have put in the same kind of effort. So it's thrilling. And I think I can speak for everyone that's been involved in this, that we are excited, we are exhausted, we're emotional, and so if I get a little bit emotional, please forgive me because this means a ton, right? This means an awful lot to all of us that are involved. But I think I should probably introduce myself a little bit since I've just spent a fair amount of time talking about myself. Hello again. My name is Weszt Hart. At Riot, I am in the role of Head of Player Dynamics, which means that I'm basically concerned about all things social, from design to development, policies to programs, and everything in between. Now, as you probably know, I am also a board member for the Thriving in Games group and have been working on the Digital Thriving Playbook since before we knew it was a playbook. Right? And now, in addition to helping write articles, I'm helping a bunch of other folks as part of our editorial team, bring additional content to the world. And that's a lot of stuff. But really, my mission is to make social simple. That's it. If I were to have a superpower, at least our friend Kim Bohl has said that it's simplification. That is what I am trying to do. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, that making social simple is no simple matter. And it's the complexity of this space in which I and everyone else here works that's relevant, right? It's important that you understand, we have a shared understanding of why and how it's so complex in order for us to understand why something like the playbook actually needs to exist. So if you don't mind, follow me on a little journey. We work in games, many of us, if not most of us. Making a game is not easy. It's actually pretty hard. And sometimes you don't actually make something fun. And in the earliest stages of game design, we call it finding the fun. Unfortunately, sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes you may spend years developing a game that you're ready to bring out to players and just realize, actually, this wasn't that fun at all. You don't find it. It's very hard to make a game and to make something fun. But it doesn't stop there, because we're not just making a game that you play like on a tabletop at home. Like, we're often making live service games. Now, this means that these games are played on servers. You may be using a mobile device or home computer or a console, right? But you're getting together with other people, and we're thinking specifically multiplayer team games. They may be logging in from anywhere in the world, and that tech needs to work. It needs to always be running. And you need to keep things really interesting, right? It needs to be, as many of us say, evergreen. So you don't just release the game and call it a day. No, you need to keep releasing content or updating the game to keep it interesting for months, weeks, and hopefully years. That's really hard. Now, let's go even further with this, because making a fun, evergreen live service game that's also safe and welcoming with great social dynamics for a worldwide mix of people is ridiculously hard. It's simply ridiculous to do. That's why we need a playbook, because we already are dealing with really complicated stuff. I know many of you in the room. I know the kinds of work that you do. We're all working in different capacities, and all of it is difficult. So on top of that, how do we make online spaces that are safe and welcoming with great social dynamics for a worldwide mix of people? But we're going to need some help. We're going to need a playbook. So we made one. That's why. At least that was initially why. Because we learned something by making this playbook. The playbook not only will simplify this ridiculously hard work, it can amplify it. Because with the Digital Thriving Playbook, we can help over 3 billion players thrive. Think about that number for a second. 3 billion people are playing games today, worldwide, and they're not all thriving yet. These stats, just a sample set, right, from Statista 2023. Percentage of players who have either experienced or have witnessed particular behaviors, and I just chose 4. Cheating, intentional disruption, hate, harassment. You can find other sources. No matter what, you're going to see that these numbers are too high. But remember when I was starting to describe this space and how hard it was to find the fun? Remember we were talking about how we have to make things continuously interesting, which means we're creating new content all the time, and we're keeping these services running, and how difficult that is. On top of all that, and the great social dynamics, we have to be concerned about these specific behaviors, and we have to get good at dealing with them. It's really hard, ridiculously hard. But again, that's why we've created the playbook, and why we need the community to contribute to it, to make it easier for all of us in order to create the experiences that we intended. But we're going to need some more experts. Let's call them digital thriving experts. In order to help 3 billion players thrive, we will need more experts in digital thriving. And I have a surprise for you today. You're going to become one of them. In this session, before we are done with this session, I should say, everyone in this room, everyone who's engaging online, everyone who's doing the exercise that you will do in this workshop, it's a small workshop in the middle, and don't worry, you're in safe hands. You will all become experts in digital thriving, because by the time we're done, you will have had more experience designing for thriving than most people on planet Earth. So I thank you in advance for your contributions, soon to be digital thriving experts. Now, how are we going to do it? This agenda, it's pretty straightforward. You don't have to do much for a little while. You can build up a little bit of confidence, if you will. Get used to the idea. You will do a little workshop, and you won't be judged. Right? But first, we're going to take a tour, because so far, we haven't actually looked at the playbook itself. So I want you to get to know it. I want you to see how it works and why. Then you're going to use a method from the playbook itself. It's called the Rafting Model. Hopefully it's fun. It is a tool that we have used within Riot Games to start to help big teams understand how, if I'm doing different work than this other team, do we all fit in together? It is a model for player behavior for businesses. Lastly, I'm going to give you some pro tips. Because, of course, at that point, you're going to be an expert. So why not level up a little bit? So we're going to give you some pro tips so that you can take them with you and take your expertise into the world. Does this sound good to everybody? Right? Okay, a little bit? Come on, we got to keep some energy up. We're getting towards the end of the day. Thank you very much. All right. Well, let's start with a tour. As everyone hopefully here knows, the Digital Thriving Playbook is a free resource for developers. We just want to put the knowledge out there so people can use it, right? And find what you need, find something useful, and get to work. Obviously, it's a website, and it will keep growing. It has been 3.5 years, truly, of research and development. And I will not walk you through the full timeline. It would be self-indulgent to do so, but I will call out a few things along the way. As you may have picked up earlier on, we just started the whole thing with a conversation around positive play. Jeff Burrell from Riot Social Impact Fund said, hey, we got the folks at the Cooney Center and the folks at the Thriving in Games Group, or FPA as we were known, and hey, maybe that'd be cool. They can talk about positive play. And literally that's what the calendar invite said, is player behavior and positive play. Anyway, humble beginnings. But we went down the road of developing a taxonomy. The world didn't need another taxonomy, we felt. We realized we needed to do something more practical, and you've heard us talk about thriving and how we got there. Along the way, we did a bunch of previews. We kept learning from the folks that we talked to. And last August, almost August, no, it was June, end of June, almost July, we soft launched with 87 articles. And it's only today that we're really telling anyone about it. And today, there are 110. 110, thank you. I thought you might like a little bit of insight, at least a very colorful spreadsheet. This is what we use to organize for soft launch. If you find yourself interested in how we figured out or which articles we would choose, we can talk about it later, because it was a real process. Because if you're developing something that is this massive, well, it could be a real headache. But anyone who's designed anything knows coming up with a good set of rules can get you far. So anyway, just a little bit of a look as to what we were using to figure out what we were going to deliver for soft launch. And if you have a really keen eye, you'll see that some of these things don't exist yet, because we've really only scratched the surface. Now, the playbook is organized into 4 different categories, which are color-coded, because that's nice. That's really about it. It just seemed very nice. Methods, examples, big ideas, and guides. The methods are the most popular part of the website. People want tools. This is what we heard through over the years, developing this. Give me something useful and help me get to work. It makes a lot of sense. And many people go to these things first, right? They want the tactical and practical techniques. However, some of us learn differently. Some of us need examples. So that is what the examples section of the site is about. Real world showcases. Now, I have put in, as you may notice, the numbers, how many of each type. Like I skipped over it with methods. There are 44 articles for methods. Right now, we see 13 examples, but that's deceptive, because some of them have at least 25 in single articles. I started to count how many I think I mentioned this earlier, how many games have we referenced? It's at least 100 individual games so far, and that's not counting other apps. And I'm going to give you a look at one of those other apps and how some of the same concepts from games apply in other digital spaces. But coming back to the point, many people just want to see who's done it. I hear this a lot. Well, who's already done this stuff? Okay. We'll just show you real world examples. And this can also include case studies, even concepts that haven't been built yet. If we think it's a good idea, if it's a promising pattern, this is where we would show that type of content. The next section, and is equally big as of the other day, as methods in terms of total article count, are big ideas. This is the foundational knowledge behind digital thriving. Like, there are some core concepts, things like well-being, you will hear a lot about. Well, we should explain what well-being is, right? We talk a lot about trust, and you're going to hear a lot about trust in this presentation. Well, we have articles on that and other concepts that it's good to know, but not everybody wants to start with these. Not everybody wants to get the educational part of things, if you will. Some do, but the information is there, like, when you need it. Lastly, guides. These are high-level tours of problem spaces. We recently published an article on child safety, on things that companies can do. We certainly don't need to have all that information in one place. Let's just link out to the articles, to the good resources that already exist. Guides can help you do that. Right? So high-level tours of specific problem spaces. The playbook has some special qualities that I feel is important to call out. And so let's go through them one at a time. The playbook is purposely practical. We had an unofficial slogan. It's only unofficial, I think, because it's difficult to translate the word grok to other languages, as far as I know. So we decided, no, we won't make this official. But grok and go is the idea. Just find something useful and get to work. You don't need to understand it all. Who could, right? I think we've established that, yeah, it's a complex space. But no. If you can get the right tool at the right time, the right information, you can make better decisions, you can make better choices and have a greater impact. So let's focus on being purposely practical, but still provide the backing so that you know we're not making this stuff up, we're just trying to make it useful. And in my experience, having looked through all those papers and those books, there's a lot of information and not a lot of it's practical, right? So we take great steps to do that. The playbook is also ever evolving. We don't pretend we have figured it all out. We may not even have all the topics or even the best organization for this material yet. That's fine, let's learn. We certainly are light years from where we started. And this is just a sample of the topics that we're already getting into. Some of them in great depth, some of them need some focus. Like resilience, I mentioned earlier. Yeah, that's one of those things that we're gonna pick up on after this day is done. We need to cover that and then provide methods or guides or examples or anything that supports it. But it's going to continue to grow. And we know of a bunch of other categories that we haven't, well, I didn't even bother to put up here. Next, community-driven. I won't name them all. Some of them are in this room, some of them are not. But these are folks that have already contributed to the playbook. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I thank you because you volunteered to do this. You didn't have to, but you had great knowledge and you wanted to share it. We want more of that. This isn't about a few of us. This is about all of us and what we can collectively do together. And so, unless something changes, the playbook will continue to be community-driven. It is research-backed. Have I said that yet? This is a screenshot I thought I might have a chance to show you. This is from my Kindle app. 14 patterns of biophilic design, which if you've gotten to know me or you know me, I really dig that. We'll touch on it in a moment. I'll try and explain. But there are papers, there are reports. That's 8 of my notebooks. There are 10 just from this particular project anyway, and this is not counting what everybody else has been collecting and distilling and identifying over the course of years and years. And though Kim isn't here to speak for herself, Kimball, I know, has had a couple of decades ahead of many of us. So there is a lot more. But again, playbook, research backed. So, you know, we're not just making this up whole cloth. The playbook, for lack of a better term, is all-inclusive. Now, this warrants some explanation. What do we mean by all-inclusive? Of course, it's a term generally used for, I don't know, resorts, I suppose. The thing is what we wanted to do was be more comprehensive, look at more dimensions at the same time that other resources weren't. Let's use the CGI framework on the left. CGI which is probably the most important tool in the playbook. It stands for community, group, individual. When we were working on our doing the taxonomy work early on, we were discovering that some resources would focus on individuals, some would do groups, some would do communities, but these things are interrelated. Your perception of a community is not shaped by the community. Your perception of a community is shaped by the small groups that you interact with. Okay, well then we need to consider that. So if the perception of the whole community starts in groups, then we should be caring about groups and their influence on communities. When you have game communities and you have content creators, those content creators certainly can influence the individuals because we model behavior, and that can influence the groups. So just as a quick example, these things are interrelated. So we need to think of them at the same time. And if you look at a lot of the big ideas that we've developed, that's what we've done. Looking at what does success look like, what are warning signs, individuals, groups, and communities. By the way, we're aware, CGI, really familiar abbreviation. We couldn't help it, nothing else stuck, so we just call it CGI. Now, full spectrum of behavior. As we mentioned earlier on, and as many of you probably know, most people who get involved in online behavior start with the disruptive behavior part of things. If you only focus on the disruptive behavior and reducing it, you're aiming for neutral because you don't create new good. You're just reducing bad. But if you also only focus on the good stuff, well, then you may ignore the things that people have to overcome in order for those good things to happen. For me, the moment that changed everything in terms of what I personally, and then we collectively wanted to focus on in the playbook, was the concept of mastery. You don't get good at something because it's simply easy. It doesn't feel good, and there's no real progression. We celebrate mastery because it's so hard. And yet, even if we aren't the ones who mastered it, let's just use a classic example of like Mozart, a master among masters. The work inspires us because it shows us what we could do, at least what is possible as a human. And that is amazing. And it feels great, and it did not come easy. And so with that, it seemed clear, well, wait a minute, you have to overcome a lot in the mastery of games alone. So maybe we're just looking at things too narrowly, right? So what we want to do with the playbook is look at the full spectrum of behavior. And in the latter part of this presentation, we're going to do a brief but yet deep dive into the behaviors at a high level that you need to care about from our perspective. Now, the last special quality I want to call out is that this is game-centric. Games are at the core of the playbook, and they always will. Why, one might ask? Because the medium is so rich. People don't just play games when you stop and think about it. Right? They buy things, they build things, they share them, they sell them. Right? They create fan fiction, they do cosplay, they broadcast, they spectate, they donate. It goes on. There's a lot of verbs, by the way, and I practice those. But there's a lot of things that people do in and around games that we might take for granted, and we just end up thinking play. But no, it's a lot. And we have learned and continue to learn a ton of hard lessons about how to help people interact successfully and sometimes not so successfully online. And given that it's still people, no matter where they are online, the lessons we learn in games are applicable everywhere. The example that I alluded to earlier. First of all, has anybody played Death Stranding in a room? Yeah. It gets dark, doesn't it? Right. One thing that I can't speak for the game developers, but I want to call out that makes it feel less dark is actually something we can identify through the lens of the subdiscipline of design, biophilic design. Biophilic design is a discipline focused on incorporating nature into architecture. Right? It generally is a physical architecture, but it doesn't need to be. Now, what biophilic design can do is reduce stress, lower blood pressure, create a sense of well-being. In Death Stranding, simply by showing you water, your stress level will reduce in a measurable way. We can see this a lot in games. people see nature, like Horizon Zero Dawn or the sequel. I mean, even though there's robots for animals, like still, it's pretty freaking cool. And in its way, you are connecting with nature. And even though it's digital, it still can have some of the same benefits. Now, as an example of how we can take just showing water or showing nature, connecting people to nature, which is one of those biophilic design principles, and apply it elsewhere, the Weather Live app. We see this now, it's pretty common in most weather apps where it might seem silly, but I can actually kind of see the weather that's happening in the place I'm at right now. It can actually reduce your stress in some small way. So this is just an example of how we can take knowledge, things that we're learning in games, and apply them in different spaces. How are we doing so far? Doing good? Okay, I wanted to check in because we've now reached part 2, where you are going to get an opportunity to use the playbook. But before we fully jump in, I would appreciate a little bit of help. How many of you work in games? That is a lot of people in the room. Right on. Okay. How many people work in some other area of tech, not games? Okay, good. How many would say none of these? All right, there's a few people, none. No worries. Enjoy the biophilic design for just a moment. All right. We have designed a tool that anybody can use. And we needed this tool within Riot, and we saw a greater need beyond, because many of us are working in very different disciplines. And many of us may be working at large companies, and it's hard to get folks thinking social, which was how I was originally using this. The model that you're going to learn, your first tool on the path to becoming a digital thriving expert, is called the Rafting Model. It is based on the real world business of whitewater rafting. I recognize that not everybody's been whitewater rafting. I learned this the hard way by giving some training around this because, no, I had to start explaining, well, what are you talking about? I've never done it. Some people flat out told me I'm never going to do it. That's fine. You don't need to do it. I'm going to go into what the business does in a moment. But I want you to get your head around the tool because it's simple, but it's powerful. I'll describe the steps in a moment, but let's start with the benefits. The rafting model can be used to proactively reduce disruptive behavior, promote pro-social behavior. In that way, you also make your games more satisfying, which means you have a greater chance of keeping players on purpose. You can avoid risk, unnecessary safety risk, unnecessary cost. You can foster digital thriving. And one of the greatest benefits of the rafting model is it helps answer 3 key questions, which we have needed for a long time, and it's worth going through them one at a time. First of all, how do we approach player behavior as a business? It simply says it's a rafting company. A rafting company doesn't wait till people go overboard to care about things like safety or trust or teamwork, because as you will learn, you're not just going down the river on a boat by yourself. You're going to have to work with other people to do it. So these concepts are absolutely necessary for the success of the business, the success of, well, to fulfill the promise of the product itself. So how do we approach it? Comprehensively, while prioritizing fun, trust, teamwork, and safety. Now, let me emphasize, this does not mean we're making our whitewater rapids easy for everybody. No, that wouldn't fulfill the promise. If the promise was overcoming that challenge, no, we're not saying reduce that. We're just saying you got to care about some other stuff up front, which we don't traditionally do. Next, what is our company's role in player behavior? I have heard judge, jury, and executioner. The model says no. No, why are you in business to do that? You are essentially a guide, a facilitator. People have come to you for an experience that you promise them. Now, they may have their own expectations, but as a guide and facilitator, you're helping make sure it happens. You are fulfilling the promise of the product, but this means you are ensuring safety, helping people enjoy themselves, and being ready to intervene when necessary. let me be blunt. I am not saying by doing this, you do not care about punitive measures. Yes, you do. You will. You have to. What we're saying is that's not your whole business. Your business is delivering the experience and doing everything you can to make sure nothing disrupts it. All right? So you will still take punitive action. Lastly, how do we know what work to do and when? Simple rule from the rafting model. Start upstream, work the whole river, design for thriving. Start upstream, work the whole river, design for thriving. This is the model. 3 phases. The more we use it, the more we get into it, and you are going to use it, you'll see how this applies to games, but multiplayer games, team-based games, work very similarly to rafting experiences. Folks get together at the start of the river. We need to make sure they start right. Expectations are set, safety measures are in place, people have what they need. When they are in that boat, which means they're in your game, they're getting to that core experience, now we're talking about the rapids. You have to fulfill the promise of the experience. That's the point of that stage. Lastly, downstream. Let's bring it together. Right? We may have to intervene as we go along, but at the end, we're trying to make sure we have a nice resolve. Think of this as a story arc. It's an easy way to remember it, because we all understand that, right? So you can start things right, then we have the big drama, which is what they came for. In whitewater rafting, it's the rapids. Otherwise, there's not the experience. And then we want to end things well. The definition I would like you to use for the designing for thriving is this. Thriving in multiplayer games is when you feel good about yourself, your interactions with others, and that you're getting good at something. Game companies are usually good at 2 of these things. Feeling good about yourself? Even Death Stranding, as stressful as it can be, I felt good about myself when I actually was surviving. I had fun despite the darkness, but also I was getting good at it, and there were ways to measure it. So progression, right? But the interactions with others is not something that we paid a lot of attention to. We're not used to thinking about that. And so this is the one missing element. But these are things that you can measure. And this is a definition I recommend that you use. But as I said, game companies are not used to thinking this way. And I'm well established how complicated the game is, but what generally happens is people get concerned about behavior when people get thrown out of the boat, essentially, right? We see churn, we see disruptive behavior. Game companies traditionally have taken a downstream approach. The model says we start upstream, right? We are going to be thinking about everything that could go wrong ahead of time, and we're going to mitigate it because that's simply good business. It fulfills the promise. We start upstream, get to the rapids, we continue downstream, right? We're working the whole river, and we design for thriving. Now, a little bit about whitewater rafting to get your head around it, and then we're going to get into the exercise. So, what is it? It's an outdoor adventure sport. You don't usually go do it by yourself. I do not recommend just going and doing it by yourself, right? Because one, you probably don't have the equipment or the knowledge to do it. You see, when you show up to a service that provides this, they've got it all worked out. They know the route. So you're going to a place where you're going to put in, as they call it. They provide you with the boat, the helmet, the paddles, instructions on how to paddle, which is very helpful because it's really frustrating if you don't. And I've been that person who didn't know at times. But anyway, you go to these companies that provide you with everything you need, including a guide to help you down the river. Now, as mentioned before, you do not usually do this alone. As you can see from a number of these photos, that there are multiple people in the same boat. You may not know them. They may not be friends. They may not be relatives, just like in modern games. They may be total strangers, but you have to work well together. You have to, or it's going to be a disaster for everyone involved. And so through these series of shared challenges that you navigate with others, right, you need to exhibit trust and teamwork, trust in each other, trust in the game, in our case, right? Trust in all the equipment, etc. It is surprisingly accessible. as an experience. They are prepared for all manner of folks. And I say all manner. It could be ages. It could be physical strength differences, experience differences. They plan for all of this. Because wouldn't it be a real shame if you had to turn people away when they showed up and they were ready to pay for the experience? No, they planned for it. And so actually the experiences are highly accessible and they're friendly and they're fun. And let me emphasize this, as safe as possible. Now why, Weszt? Wouldn't you say they just make it safe? I mean, take a look. These are inflatable boats going over and around rocks on a river. You can't make it 100% safe or you'll deprive the folks of the experience that you promised. No, it can't be. There is some inherent risk. And it's that risk that actually helps create the rewards. At this point, you have more than enough to use the model. The pieces of paper that you see on the tables around you are what you're going to be using in this exercise. And you're going to use it for Armadillo Arena, the exciting sequel to Wombat Combat. It is not a real game. I know, right? Thank you. Isn't it amazing what you can do with 3 different images off of Google Images? I just pasted this in, but the colors match so nice. I'm like, all right, I'm done. All right, let's just figure out what the game is. So it's not a real game. Maybe we can create it. You're going to have a chance today to figure out how it might work. But describing the overall game, intense real-time battles where your skills and tactics are put to the ultimate test. So it is not just playing through one time. You do multiple battles as a 3-person team against another 3-person team. You each have abilities as armadillos, not super relevant to today, but I could imagine, well, obviously shell strength is going to be one of them. But putting that aside for the moment, what we're going to do is use the model to determine which features we might use where. We're going to help the team behind the game figure out what they're going to put where and why. But just a quick review at the model. The model is going to be used like an experience map. And if you've used experience maps, and I know many of you have, the idea is to look through the eyes of a person across a period of time, all the things they might interact with. This can be used as a standardized experience map, at least at a meta level. What I would like you to do right now, please take a piece of paper and a pen. Please, this is the interactive part. This is when we get our energy up. I want you to draw a squiggly line like it's a river. Turn your page so it's long, landscape mode, if you will. First, you're just going to draw a squiggly line because you are making a river. Yes, you could do this as a plain table. That is boring. But once you have that squiggly line to represent your river, draw 2 lines so you're dividing it into 3 parts. You're recreating the rafting model. This is going to be your framework for the exercise. I'll give you a minute or so to do that. And by the way, also put the labels at the top. It'll help you. Upstream, rapids, downstream. I'll go back. Whoop, wrong way. Let's try that a little bit so you can see. You're basically recreating that, getting your head into the space. About the simplest exercise you may have to do. Pretty good? Okay. We're getting there. I'll move on then. Oh, wrong way, going backwards. I think everybody's in a good place. All right. Another quick review, because I want this top of mind. I've been calling these the 3 T's lately. I don't know if that'll stick, but anyway, thriving. I want you to remember that definition once again, okay? When you feel good about yourself, your interactions with others, and that you're getting good at something. This is one of the things you're designing for when you're designing for thriving. That's kind of catchy, isn't it? Oh, we should have had that in our swag. Design it for thriving. Well, hold the note. Next, just remember that trust and teamwork are what we're going to be designing for. So 3 T's, thriving, trust, teamwork. And here's what you're going to do. Your game team is thinking about using all of these features, and I'm going to describe them to you. Oh, by the way, I should tell you that there's not going to be a wrong answer. I'm not going to look at your pages. I'm not going to ask you to speak unless you really, really want to. I'll put myself on the spot. But what you're going to do is figure out where, out of those three categories, out of those three stages in our model, these features could go individually. Let me describe them. Behavior penalties. So somebody has violated, let's say, your code of conduct. They got busted in some way. You give them a penalty. Where might that go between upstream, rapids, and downstream? And by the way, if you have ideas, feel free to start. Next, well, code of conduct. Well, that's probably related in some way. This is when you're telling the community, these are the expected behaviors, right? Could be what you want them to do, could be what they shouldn't do. Where might that go? In upstream, rapids, downstream. So thinking in terms of a game, from the beginning of the game to the core experience to the end, right? That's how the model works. Next, friend invites. You want to play the game, you got a 3-person team. When might you invite them to the game? Heal a teammate is the ability of one armadillo to save another armadillo. Well, hopefully, if you're quick enough. Where might that mechanic go? High fives, reciprocal mechanic, celebrating that somebody did something great. Where might you put that? Progression system. Remember, we talked about it before. This is how people can see that they're getting good at something. Where would you put those? Replays, so people reliving a great moment in the game. Reputation, people play enough games, they get recognized by their teammates for being good at something. Where might that manifest? I'm going to give you a few minutes on this, and then I'll show you what I did. And if somebody could watch the clock for me, or help me watch the clock, about 5 minutes. That might have actually been a little bit quicker than I anticipated. Okay, let's go ahead and let me show you what I did. Here's my example. Now, I'm going to walk you through, and then I'm going to explain some of it, but I might skip around. Man, you work on a slide for a long time, and you don't know what anyone's going to do. Thank you, Edith. That made my whole day, that reaction right there. Okay. So starting at the top, friend invites. I actually kind of put it in between upstream rapids because, well, I didn't know enough about the game to know when you might actually invite someone in based on the design. So I kind of flubbed it a little bit and said, well, maybe you do it later. I don't know. Maybe somebody could pinch it. Probably not. But if you want somebody to be on your team, you probably want to do it before you play, right? And replays were kind of easy because it's hard. Well, you kind of have to play to replay. So putting it after the experience would make sense. Now, I'm going to skip the middle for just a second because I want to spend some time. But at the bottom, code of conduct. You don't want to wait to do that at the end to tell people what the behavior expectations are. It makes much more sense to do it earlier. However, you don't have to stop there. Why only post that this is the behaviors you want to see once when there might be other ways to influence it? Now, we're just doing a high-level exploration, so we don't know what we might do. But it is possible that during the core game, during those intense team battles where your skills and tactics are put to the ultimate test, that we might reinforce it in some ways. We might do the same thing at the end if a player needed to report behavior. We might include that sort of influence there. Behavior penalties. Thinking, and I didn't provide this detail, but I will share it. When I was looking into rafting companies to make sure I wasn't misrepresenting them, I spent a fair amount of time looking at their frequently asked questions. For people who are being trained as rafting guides, there's actually recommendations for what to do for drunk spring breakers. You don't let them in the boat, right? It makes total sense. But that's an example of a preemptive or a proactive intervention. Anybody familiar with name check services that you use in games? Right. So the name check service you can use when someone creates an account to make sure an inappropriate name does not enter the system. It's not dissimilar, right? It's a proactive intervention. So yes, you absolutely can. You just have to figure out how. Additionally, you can do real-time interventions and reactive interventions. Now, most of us probably think about okay, you get a penalty when the game is done, But a real-time intervention, to use an example from League of Legends, is like an auto mute, where we can detect something that shouldn't be exposed to others because that was a really nasty thing for someone to say. And if you got the tech, you can stop it in real time, right? And you potentially could take actions on that, like a auto mute, which I believe is what they do on League, but I haven't worked on that system, so if I'm misrepresenting it, forgive me. Now let's talk about the middle a little bit. So there's a really interesting combination of things there, and that system you see, I want you to internalize a bit, because it is not one feature alone that's trying to produce those feelings of teamwork and trust and thriving. It's a combination, because that's how social works. I will emphasize this later. Social is a system. Here, we see some of those core mechanics. We'll actually heal a teammate. Makes perfect sense for that to be in the core game loop, because you wouldn't be healing them if they're not playing, right? So you got to heal a fellow armadillo, right? A fellow armadillo. Oh boy, I'm getting a little loopy. It's been a day. But yeah, so that makes sense. It's like a core mechanic. Now, if someone does a great move, maybe they do heal you. High fives make a lot of sense. This could be in the core loop, as we say in games, which is that primary experience the game is designed around, or even later on. Right? So maybe, I think I put it a little on the outside. Progression system, of course, show people that they're getting good at something over a period of time. But the reason I put this loop in there is because this is a game where there's multiple battles. If you remember, you do it again and again. And so these things in combination and repeated use can help you feel good about yourself. You healed someone, or you got healed. Feel that you enjoyed your interactions with others. Like, yes, we had this great team moment, right? And we high-fived, and you solidify that, and you start to build trust. And by working well together, you're exhibiting teamwork. So that's how these features hit those 3 T's. The reputation is particularly interesting, at least in my opinion, because if over the course of time, and these are systems that do exist in games, and even things like eBay or Uber, right? They all have their own reputation systems, right? But it comes from people exhibiting particular behaviors again and again that they get known for. You can visualize and celebrate trust. You can actually develop trust that's recognized in the way the community itself cares about. These loops, again and again, thriving, trust, and teamwork. And that teamwork, call it out, needs pro-social behavior. We didn't bribe a single person to do it. So when folks talk about, we need to encourage pro-social behavior, design for it. That actually helps fulfill the promise of the experience. This is an example of how you have to have trust and teamwork, and we can design for it. And I called that out. Feel good about themselves, their interactions with others, and that they're getting good at something. But let me be the first to congratulate you. You now are a digital thriving expert. When people ask you why, I said, I was designing for a game, and you did. So congratulations. But with the playbook, we don't have to stop with just this tool. Like, this is a great introductory tool. And we are going to use this at GDC with a couple of other tools to show how can you go much deeper in designing for pro-social behavior. But I want to show you one here for extra credit, because I talked about the CGI framework. This is an example of what you can do with those tools combined. Now, it's super colorful, but you can do this just as a simple table, right? So you have 3 columns, 3 rows. But I want to call out the features that are here. Right, some of the features we talked about before, we can see at the individual and group level. So what we're doing is actually looking at the features across a game done by many teams across a company and seeing how each of their pieces of work are collectively helping us fulfill the promise of our games, start things right, end things well at 3 different levels: individuals, groups, and community. But the community, I think, is particularly interesting. Brand values. The values you state should be in the products you make. And what you're saying to the community starts to set their expectations. That's how this work fits. Content creator program. Content creators are the billboards of your game. They bring people in, people will model their behavior after them. So this is how you can start to think about how that fits into the bigger picture. World finals. Like some of us work on games that are played as sports. They have world finals. Again, people get excited after they watch them. They come play. What influenced their behavior there? And what helped in the middle of all that? Esports referees. So this is just showing how with 2 tools from the playbook, we can actually organize and plan the work for a much bigger group than just a game team. We can do it for whole organizations, and this is just a taste of what we can have from the playbook. And I realize now that I actually highlighted that. Sorry, that would have been nice. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, or you want to at least go, oh, that's what he was talking about in isolation, great. Okay, no more interaction. We are going to wrap up what's essentially a speed run. We're going to try and end on a high note because we're digital thriving experts. Now we're going to give you some quotables, if you will, some real nuggets, some gems from the playbook that you can use that will make your work that much more impactful and hopefully make you sound really, really smart. So let's start with this. People are hardwired for thriving. We all want it. And we go back to the people and the places that make us feel good about ourselves and our lives and those interactions. This is important because it brings us to the simplest business case that I could ever give you. They thrive, we thrive. If players are getting that feeling of thriving, they will come, play, stay, and pay all day, and they will bring people with them. And there is data to back this up. This isn't just, let's hope it happens. No, it does. It does happen. If you've got that thriving network, you will come back because it's giving you this thing that you're hardwired for. And we all want that. So they thrive, we thrive. First pro tip. Next. Hope is out of scope. Think about it. We're experts with the rafting model. Do you want to hope people stay in the boat? No. Or maybe you do. I won't speak for you. No, you don't want to hope that's going to happen, right? You do everything you can to make sure they stay in the boat. Choosing to wait is choosing to lose. You can wait till folks are downstream, but at that point, it's difficult to change. If you think about the downstream approach, remember, people are coming, they're coming down the river, they're coming down the river, they're coming down the river. This is why punitive measures aren't enough, because you can't get ahead of it, right? Choosing to wait is choosing to lose. Hope is out of scope. You heard this a moment ago. Social is a system. There's no silver bullet. You will not find one feature that fixes people. It doesn't work that way. We don't work that way. Our behaviors are a product of our environment. If you want to get really deep into some social science, look up Lewin's behavior equation. It's awesome. Behavior is a function of a person and their environment. If you change the environment, you'll change the behaviors. And you might as well focus on that, because trying to change people, good luck. But there's no silver bullet for behavior, okay? Social is a system. Next, resilience disrupts disruption. If you want to know why we're seeing problems in a community and country level right now, it's because people don't feel a sense of thriving. And when they don't, those communities, well, they're fertile ground for bad actors. But when a community is feeling it's thriving, it's resilient, and they naturally resist bad actors. Resilience disrupts disruption. This is basically, for lack of a better term, like the holy land of our work. This is what we're going for. Right? We want to build resilience in the communities because they will be able to moderate in a way that we could never afford to do. And you don't want to do that unless your game is called Police State. Maybe then. But the more that you penalize a community, the more you're going to lose the good people too, the good models. They will leave. They're not going to want to put up with that. So there's only so far you can go. So you have to work in a more holistic way. Holistic over ballistic. Next. Now, we got some jewels coming, so buckle up, folks. Trust is a must. No trust, no social. CGI model at the bottom, individuals, if they do not as individuals, our players, anyone, even in this room, if you do not trust the people you're interacting with, the company, or its systems, it will undermine all other social efforts, all of them. No trust, no social. Trust is a must. Let's put this into practice. Here's a formula for understanding the benefits, the rewards from highly competitive team games. When teams trust each other and they work really well in a high-stakes situation, the rewards are even higher. But if they don't, if you have low trust, folks, in high-stakes situations, you'll get churn. I realized part of the way through that churn not only is a term we use in gaming and maybe other companies to show people are spinning out of your game, it also means turbulent water. So if you're teaching somebody the rafting model, throw in churn because it's really kind of a neat, happy coincidence. But I digress. So if folks do not trust each other in high-stakes situations, high-pressure situations, they will take it out on each other. And so a lot, not all, but a lot of the behaviors that people perceive as bad behaviors, and this is almost a quote from the book Pro-Social, is due to situational constraints. A lot of what people think is disruptive behavior is caused because they do not trust each other in a high-pressure situation. That is one recipe for churn, not the only one. Sometimes people do just want to be disruptive or harmful. People who cheat, who use third-party software, easy example, because of how far they went before they played the game to be disruptive. It's probably the easiest group in a way to deal with because they're easier to detect because you go, oh, well, they're using cheating software. Okay, that's really grossly oversimplifying what it takes to identify folks who are using cheating software, but hopefully you get the point. Disruptive behavior can create low trust. That's one path to it. But low trust doesn't necessarily lead to disruption, or disruption doesn't necessarily, well, anyway, these things you need to consider individually and collectively, because they're related, but they may require different solutions. This is one of my favorite slides. We recommend specificity, not toxicity. I said this before, and I am not ashamed to say it in the same way. Toxicity as a term is too damn broad. It means too many things, and I'm going to show you some of those things in just a moment. But it's too broad to be practical, because you always have to get to, well, what do we specifically mean? Because it could mean that we have to deal with design flaws that are causing people to behave in a way that's not the intention of the game. Is that their fault or ours? That's what we have to figure out. So the recommendation is to be more specific. And let me show you a landscape of the behaviors. Remember, the playbook, full spectrum of behaviors. Here's the highest level that I can give you. There are two types of behaviors you got to care about. Just think about us on the river. Actually, no. Isn't that photo on the right frickin' awesome? I'd like to think that guy's turning over the boat, but he is owning it. Yeah, I know it's disruptive, but anyway, it's just, I just find it mesmerizing. So thank you. I may not get to use this slide again, so I wanted to indulge myself. But all right, two big categories of behaviors, productive and disruptive. Productive are the ones you want. They help produce thriving. Disruptive are the behaviors you don't, because they undermine it. Well, what do those mean? Well, here are some categories. Productive behaviors include things like amenability, assertiveness, creativity. Like, we took steps to write about creativity for the playbook because you might, as we did, start with building blocks. Actually, there's a lot more creativity that goes on in games without having building blocks, and I encourage you to check them out. So this is important. This helps produce thriving in various ways, in part because it produces a sense of well-being and accomplishment. But we go on, prosociality, sociability, resilience. Now disruptive behaviors. Hold on, because I'm going to speed run through this. This is the speed run. Competitive harm, forms of cheating, which can be using boosted accounts. It's not, well, as uncommon a complaint as we'd like, as it does happen, right? It's disrupting, like, the proper use of communications. Disruptive play. That can be things like body blocking. The body blocking is interesting because a game designer may choose to not allow one character to pass through another because it makes sense in terms of the games, but now someone may have the ability to keep you from leaving a corner. And you're stuck, and it's frustrating. One example, fraudulent activity, stolen credit cards, impersonation, illegal activity. Well, that may also include stolen credit cards and impersonation, but it could be trying to sell illegal drugs through our systems, inappropriate sharing, spoiling a movie. And then there's the unintended disruption, where I just don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm struggling, and I've been that person. And thank you to the person that forgave me as I was playing Dr. Mundo in League many years ago, and he said, Mundo, patience. But I didn't know what I was doing. I was flailing, and I wasn't trying to throw the game, but it might appear that way. So that's a category worth considering, too. We've done our speed run. We're going to do a little review, because we're now coming towards the end. Well, let's just look over everything that we have covered in the last hour or so. Starting with the tour, the playbook, it's a free resource for developers, 3.5 years in the making. We've launched today. Oh, it's amazing to say that. Today is the official launch. We have 110 articles. Thank you. 110 articles in 4 categories to make it easy for folks to find the information that they need. Find something useful, right, and get to work. There are over 100 game examples and growing. The playbook is intended to be purposely practical, ever-evolving, community-driven. We want to make sure we continue to bring the research to back it up. It includes it is a more all-inclusive approach, and of course, games at the core. In this time together, you became an expert in digital thriving. You have done more than most people on planet Earth in terms of designing for digital thriving. Good start, right? Good start, I think, to launching the playbook. Yeah, you've done this by learning the rafting model, which teaches us to start upstream, work the whole river, design for thriving, and we did it for the exciting sequel of Wombat Combat, Armadillo Arena. We got some pro tips. They thrive, we thrive. Hope is out of scope. Social is a system. You saw that as we went through the rafting model example. Resilience disrupts disruption. Trust is a must because no trust, no social. We then were looking at trust in terms of the high stakes games, or the high stakes of highly competitive team games. And then we got into how we really recommend specificity, like not toxicity. I really hate to ask for a little bit more of your time. I am feeling a little guilty about that, but there is just one last thing I want to show you. Grover. Super Grover, for those in the know. Grover is a character from Sesame Street, but he has a superhero persona, so Super Grover. And Grover is close to my heart. As a matter of fact, I did bring like a couple of gifts, so he's actually on the table over there. From our folks at Cooney Center. I thought wanted to thank you once again for that gift, but I love Grover, and this representation of Grover was from the original playbook prototype from a few years ago, and it was quite the process to figure out it was going to be a playbook. We didn't know what form it would take, so we were using slides, and this was one of them. And we were finding quotes from different people or characters that were capturing like the vibe, right? Like what's the spirit of the playbook? And this is the quote that I found. Now, Grover said this, admittedly in kind of a flippant way, in an episode of Sesame Street in 1988. But it's powerful, right? Like, where there is life, there is hope. And I'm as determined, hell-bent, if you will. I'm like, I've got to show this. I don't know if I'll ever get another or better opportunity to show this slide, but I set myself up for failure. If you think about that pro tip from a few minutes ago, hope is out of scope. I got to admit, I had a bit of an existential crisis. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to resolve this? And I actually realized that if this went well, and if you became digital thriving experts, well, you will have actually solved this problem for me. Because We're proactive, right? We start upstream, we work the whole river. Like, we're comprehensive. We are not waiting for problems to happen. You didn't through the work that you did, right? Digital thriving experts actually don't hope for the future. We make it. And we are making it. And it's a fair question to say, well, how? How do I know we're making it? Well, hopefully it's obvious. Because the digital thriving playbook exists. It exists. But it doesn't just exist because some of us worked on it. It exists because there are thousands of developers who've done the ridiculously hard work that's made it possible. It exists because of the ridiculously hard work of thousands of people, right, who've been making these games, whose examples we draw on, who've learned the hard lessons. And the digital thriving playbook, right, is intended to simplify and amplify that ongoing hard work. It exists. Hope is out of scope because we're making the future. We don't have to hope for it. And with the digital thriving playbook, we can now do much more than make something fun, right? We can help over 3 billion players thrive. And, lest we forget, if they thrive, we thrive. That's it. Thank you very much.